Hi, I'm Benjamin Fry, and in this video we're going to talk about why we find it so difficult to agree on reality with each other. So one of the interesting things about humans is that we disagree a lot, and you'll notice this in families, in relationships, in politics, dare I mention it these days, and generally speaking in life. I mean, look at any meeting in an office and people have different views about what should be done, and a lot of that comes from different views about what is actually going on right now. So we have this kind of confusing situation where a lot of disagreement comes down to basic disagreement about what is real, what is reality, what is actually going on in the world, or in the family, or in the office, or even in the room, or in the relationship. People just don't always see the basic facts themselves. And this is somewhat confusing, because if you think that a human being was like, say, a video camera, two video cameras would record the same event with very little difference. They might have different angles, they might have different lenses, they might have different fields of view, but basically anyone looking at it would say they were watching the same event. But two human beings don't seem to be the same. This raises an important question of why. And if you understand the story of the nervous system, it's quite easy actually to explain why. One of the things that we begin to see as being everywhere, as ubiquitous, is that where human beings are involved, there is a delay in their nervous system in how they respond to things. So we have a lot of unfinished business to do with earlier things that have happened in our lives. We have a lot of unfinished responses to prior threats. And this then creates a different way of reacting to things for different people. So different people can react to the same event in very different ways, depending on how much baggage they're carrying, which is similar to that event itself. So if someone has been held up at knife point 1,000 times, and then they're held up at knife point, they're going to have a very different reaction to someone to whom this has never happened before. Now, maybe that they completely shut down, or maybe that they overreact. You don't quite know if they're going to over or underreact. But what you do know is that they're going to be reacting to a lot more than what is happening right now. And this is important because it actually changes the relationship of the brain with itself. To understand that, you have to understand that the brain is not just this one thing we think of as my mind perhaps, or my brain. It's in fact a bit like a computer. It has hundreds and thousands of components and many, many, many different decision centers. So inside your brain right now, lots of different things are going on at the same time. And in the end, a bit like a divided parliament, it has to come to one decision and take one action or have one thought. This isn't always so easy, and it can be a bit of a fight. So for simplicity's sake, we can look at the brain as being a very small reptile brain wrapped in a slightly larger mammal brain wrapped in a much larger human brain. So think of three brains, and they all emerge at different times in evolution, and they've got slightly different plans about what to do because they have slightly different experiences of what is going on in the world. So here's the problem. When we have a lot of unfinished business, unfinished responses to earlier threats, what happens is that when something similar happens in the here and now, we will add in an awful lot of information from earlier on. So for example, you might raise an eyebrow at me and I might think in my body, my physiology might be saying, this person's going to kill me. Because I grew up in a household where maybe there was domestic violence, and domestic violence to a 3-year-old can look like a life and death situation, and it can begin with a raised eyebrow. So if my body's saying this is a situation where death could happen, my physiology is going to react very strongly, and I'm either going to go into fight or flight, or I'm going to go into shutdown, so I could start yelling, or I could become very passive. Someone else who has had none of these experiences will just see a raised eyebrow and it's no big deal. They will use social engagement. They will be charming and friendly to try and find out perhaps what is wrong, why the raised eyebrow, is something upsetting you, is something difficult. So these are two very different responses. Now, the problem is that if my physiology from the bottom up is saying, here you go, here's a life and death response to the current situation, what do you think my prefrontal cortex from the top down is going to make of that? So the reptile and mammal brains are saying, run, 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 run for your life. And the prefrontal cortex is then looking around, interpreting words, interpreting people, interpreting situations. And I got two choices at this point. I can either think I'm going crazy because it's like I hear a fire alarm, but I can't see a fire. Or my other choice is that I can invent a fire. So if I want to not feel the discomfort on the inside, I can then put the discomfort on the outside by saying, you, with your raised eyebrow, you are genuinely a very scary and dangerous person, and I should be concerned about you, and I should be running for my life. Now, I've just created a reality that maybe isn't there. And sometimes this is called projection, all sorts of things it can be called in the history of psychology, but really what it is it's saying, I feel the invisible lion, and so I'm going to say that the invisible lion is here. I'm not going to understand that it comes from 30 years ago. I'm going to make sure that I convince you that you are a lion and you are threatening me. Now, if you think about politics, you think about the breadth of politics from the far left to the far right, you could look at this as this is a spectrum of where people are putting their individual lions. So in the middle, maybe there's not so much projecting going on, and on the far left and the far right, people are projecting greatly, but they're just projecting the opposite threats, depending on, usually, on the way that they grew up and the influences they're exposed to. So we see all around us all the time the result of this. We see reality as a distortion. Reality is something that is of an individually interpreted nature, and it's interpreted through the lens of our nervous system, and particularly through the lens of the unfinished business in our nervous system. And that means that the reality of today is very hard to distinguish from the reality of my whole life up to today, and particularly the things in it that are unfinished. So the problem is, this puts us in a situation where we never quite know what's going on the outside and what's going on the inside. So it's a great idea to become more skillful at being aware of what's going on the inside, and also much more skillful in our dialogue about how we discuss with others what we think is happening right now, in the here and now in the room. And these are two of the great skills that I'm advocating you find for yourself in my book, The Invisible Lion, is on the one hand to go inside, into the body, and to find the distress and the unfinished business there. And on the other hand, when dealing with the world on the outside, to begin to develop a different metric, a different way of talking that comes from being aware from what's on the inside and how that might be stimulated by what's on the outside. So instead of saying, you are a lion, and therefore ... about you, I might be able to say, I'm aware that I begin to feel like I'm being chased by a lion. And the lion probably isn't here, but one of the things that's stimulating that feeling is maybe something that's going on between us right now. So we can begin to see that although it's not that there's nothing happening in the here and now, my reaction to that may not be all about what's happening in the here and now. And this is a great way for beginning to reality test between two people. So this could be in a relationship, it could be in a family, it could be in an office, it could be in any community environment where people will inevitably come to the point where they disagree with each other about what's going on. At that point, it's much better to go inside, because nobody can disagree with me if I say I feel distressed, or if I say I feel angry, or if I say I feel shut down, or if I say I feel worried. They can only disagree with me if I say that you are doing this to me, and that's why I feel like this. So understanding the story of the nervous system can help us understand why we disagree about reality, and helping us to disagree about reality can help us to have much better, well-formed and productive relationships with each other. This was Benjamin Fry talking about some of the concepts from my recent book, The Invisible Lion. If you'd like to know more about the resources and the techniques that we discussed in this video, please have a look at the website, theinvisiblelion.com, look at the resources tab, and look at the information on how to get hold of the book.